each other.
Janice.
Haas.
Oh, Jan Haas, is that
Yeah.
what she's doing?
Yeah, she had that too.
Oh. I wondered why she was on the prayer list. Huh.
Yeah.
There we are.
Hi.
Yeah, just put that right around her, didn't she?
Oh, she got it.
I'll be in it too.
Let's start with the prayer. Oh God, you
Gave
gave
your only Son to suffer death on the cross for our redemption, and by his glorious resurrection you delivered us from the power of death. Make us die every day to sin, that we may live with him forever in the joy of the resurrection, through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
By the way, I thought the service Sunday was very, very nice.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
Oh, thank
Yes,
you.
it was.
Yep.
Good turnout, too.
Took 3 of you to read the gospel, but
Four.
Four.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that was nice.
yeah,
We got
but it was
different-
nice.
Different voices. Thank you. Appreciate that. We're in Easter now. Well, we will be on Sunday, and so that's why the Old Testament is replaced by the Acts reading.
Well, I will read it if you like. Peter began to speak to the people. I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. You know the message he sent to the people of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all. That message spread throughout Judea, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John announced. How God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit and with power, how he went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with him. We are witnesses to all that he did, both in Judea and in Jerusalem. They put him to death by hanging him on a tree, but God raised him on the 3rd day and allowed him to appear, not to all the people, but to us who were chosen by God as witnesses and who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one ordained by God as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name.
Well, the one thing I would just say here is that the Gentiles hear the good news, and that is an important piece, the inclusion of the Gentiles. And Peter was the one that, as you know, led that charge most. The message spread throughout Judea, beginning in Galilee after the baptism that John announced. So it began, he's saying it began before Jesus even died. That the message was beginning to spread. But I wonder in those early days how fast it actually spread. Yeah. Are we talking thousands of people or hundreds? Or, just how we don't have a quantification of. It just says that it spread, and I think that's I think that's a lesson for the church today, is that we get so wrapped up in numbers that, whether or not we have 1,000 people in church or 20, we're still going to share the story. And I don't know. I think we get too wrapped up in numbers sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else you notice in here, but the one thing that Peter that I always find interesting is, instead of calling it the cross, he calls it a tree.
A tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think, or to me, it feels like that's pointing to, like, right, many people have been crucified. It was like a great form of torture for the Romans. But that this was like still while it was gaining its prominence, like as a symbol, and it was still like, oh yeah, the tree, the hunk of wood they hung him on, rather than like the cross as like the idea of Jesus, the symbol.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because the cross itself would have been a well-known tool of capital punishment for the Roman Empire, but the cross would have been a symbol of death. But after Jesus died on it, it got reframed and became a symbol of salvation.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a stupid question, but so before Jesus was hung on the cross, other people that was their means of death?
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. In particular, specifically those who had crimes against the state. So,
I never thought about it, actually.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And Jesus was considered an enemy of the state, because he was proclaiming himself as king, and so they hung they usually put over the cross the reason for the death. So it was a very public. It was meant to be a very public. It was terror, is what it was, and it was meant to be scare people and try to prevent them from doing anything bad. And so they would put the sentence that they were sentenced to over the cross, and what they did for Jesus was a portrayal of the Jews, which was meant by the Roman authorities, the chief priests, etc., to be a mockery of Jesus. And as we know, it's the truth. So it's not really a mockery. It's, we do proclaim him as a king, but not just like the Jews, but of God's kingdom. But yeah, that would have been a very. And I was just reading something the other day about it, and I didn't know this. This is, you always pick up little tidbits of information in there. They usually, a lot of times, they would hang them lower to the ground so that they were accessible to wild animals and birds. But for Jesus, they hung him higher
because he was king of the Jews.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that we know why.
They wanted more people to see.
Possibly, but it was rare that they had burials, because the bodies were just, there was
Nothing left.
nothing left.
Oh.
So that's why there was that area in Jerusalem, Golgotha, the place of the skull. That was reserved. I mean, it was like a dumping ground for bodies. So that's what it was reserved for, was to keep it out of the way. So, because can you imagine? I mean, but that, yeah, So that Joseph of Arimathea went to Pontius Pilate and asked for the body. And he was granted the body, and then he wrapped him in linen and anointed him. And actually, the tomb that they placed Jesus in, they believe was actually Joseph of Arimathea's, the tomb he was supposed to be buried in. He had a burial plot that he bought.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, the things you learn, but
Yeah.
oh, sorry for the gruesome detail, but that was the point of it, and they wanted people to walk by and say, oh.
Anybody watch Game of Thrones?
No.
It really
No.
Game of Thrones vibes from
Did
this.
not.
There's some crucifixions in Game of Thrones.
Oh,
You know, yeah. Definitely a good way to send a message,
yeah.
as opposed to, like a hanging or a beheading, which are quick and not as painful. It's a long, drawn-out process.
Yeah, Jesus was hung on the cross at 9 a.m. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the temple over the curtain was torn in two, according to Mark. So he wasn't up there very long. And the primary method of death and the crucifixion is asphyxiation, because your body becomes so weak, and it leans over, hunches over, and it squeezes your lungs so that you can't expand your lungs to breathe. Anyway.
Well, shall I read Psalms?
Yes.
Give thanks to the Lord, for the Lord is good. God's mercy endures forever. Let Israel now declare, God's mercy endures forever. The Lord is my strength and my song, and has become my salvation. Shouts of rejoicing and salvation echo in the tents of the righteous. The right hand of the Lord acts valiantly. The right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord acts valiantly. I shall not die, but live, declare the words of the Lord. The Lord indeed punished me sorely, but did not hand me over to death. Open for me the gates of righteousness. I will enter them and give thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. Here the righteous may enter. I give thanks to you, for you have answered me, and you have become my salvation. The stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. But the Lord has this been done. By the Lord has this been done. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
That's a psalm refrain for Sunday, verse 24. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in
Yeah. I think sometimes we all often wonder why they cut out chunks of the song. I think they cut out those set of verses just because it's a really long song. They wanted to get to the other 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is like this, right? A song of victory. But, so it's all like the same theme, but they wanted to get us to that, like, the cornerstone and then this is the day part. So they cut out part of the beginning.
Well, also, the pieces that they cut out are less personal than the ones that they left. Just glancing at it, but all nations surrounding me. Well, maybe there's still that me language, I guess, but
Yeah. They're focusing on the salvation part, less on the what you needed saving from part. They surrounded me like bees.
And then there's the imagery of the cornerstone, the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone.
Well, how come they repeat, of course? The right hand of the Lord acts valiantly. The right hand of the Lord is exalted. The right hand of the Lord acts valiantly. You repeat that twice.
I think it's a song.
Ah,
Yeah, the first part of 15 is there are glad songs of victory in the tents of the righteousness, and then it tells us the song.
I see.
So think of that like, the refrain.
Sure.
That would repeat itself.
Yeah, and often in the psalm, there's emphasis. There's usually two lines that echo each other as a point of emphasis of that thing. But maybe that's
Yeah. I love that imagery of the cornerstone. Right, like the builders rejected, right? So the builders of the society, they rejected Jesus, but he still became the cornerstone. Like, because I'm all about systems and changing the system, right? So that's what Jesus did.
Well, it's really interesting to me still how the Psalms can point to the reality of Jesus so well and prophesize. It's just interesting how they always seem to find ways to fit in with the story of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Should we go to Corinthians?
I agree with that. If for this life only we have hope through Christ, we are of all people most to be pitied. But in fact, Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. For since death came through a human being, the resurrection of the dead has also come through a human being. For as all die in Adam, so all will be made alive in Christ. But each in his own order. Christ the first fruits, then at his coming those who belong to Christ. Then comes the end, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father, after he has destroyed every ruler and every authority and power. For he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death.
This is Paul. It's interesting. Paul wrote this letter to the Corinthians is older than the Gospels. And so I've often wondered, he uses the word hoped in Christ, and that word does not occur in the Gospels when they're telling the story of Jesus. So Paul is writing this letter in real time, per necessity, to write to the Corinthians. He's framing for them the cross and what it means. And he uses the word hope. And that word does not come about right after the empty tomb. I mean, the very first feeling that people experience are fear, and they're perplexed, they're surprised. There's all kinds of words, feelings, words for feelings that describe the first witnesses of it, but none of them are hope. So that word comes after some time, but it must have been enough time that Paul was able to frame for them no, this is hope, because this is the story of the resurrection. Death has been destroyed. In verse 22, for as all die in Adam, so all will be made alive in Christ. That's really what we proclaim in baptism, is that we die. We die in Adam and we rise in Jesus. Christ, of course, being the title of Jesus, the Christ, the Christos.
I think it's a little eschatological.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
She's using their fancy word.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was that word again?
Eschatological, referring to end times.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like this whole first fruit thing, which I don't know. But that because Jesus was resurrected, we will be resurrected, and then it's talking about then comes the end when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father. He's destroyed every ruler and authority and power, and the last enemy to be destroyed is death.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
At some point in the story, they began to realize that Christ's resurrection is tied to our salvation. So the fact that Jesus comes back with a resurrected body, and that's described in the Gospels, what that looked like. But so what does that mean for the rest of us? And what Paul is saying is that promise of the resurrection is shared with us. That's what we will have one day on the day of resurrection. So it's not something I talk about when people die, because the family is grieving, and to get into as Greta was saying, well, let me talk about eschatology with you.
So you have hope.
Yeah, let's sit down so I can explain eschatology. You don't do that. Those kinds of conversations are meant for other occasions, like Bible study. But there's never a time that we're apart from Jesus. I mean, that's the promise. However, the day of resurrection has not come, so we will all be resurrected. So whatever happens when we die, that's all fine and good. We're with the Lord, but there will be a day of resurrection when there will be a new creation, a new body, and that's the promise. So what happens in the in-between? Well, there's something, but something mysterious. Our loved ones are still, their bodies are dead, but what happens in that in-between time, the body dies and the day of resurrection is, a lot of speculation is involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we die, we are not resurrected the moment we die. That's the point. There's still life to come. We're with God, but
or this time, God does His own time. Like maybe everybody dies at the same time, even though for us it's over years and years. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't like to think about it because it gets confusing. It doesn't sometimes.
Anyway, we're not going to think about that during funerals or even during Sunday morning. But That's basically what Paul. I mean, you read Paul, you pay attention to the New Testament and the story. That's the promise of the resurrection is assured. So. And then Luke, which he also wrote Acts, so we're hearing from Luke twice. Because you were in the year of Luke, so we read Luke's material. The resurrection of Jesus.
I can read it. On the first day of the week, at early dawn, the women came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified and on the 3rd day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened.
So who is Joanna?
That's what I was just going to say.
That's been speculated. I don't think we know.
Yeah. Is this the only time she's ever mentioned by name?
There's also what I've read about that is a very common name in that day too. So, I don't know. What I like to do is have you read through this and just pick out the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
What's the very first reactions? Perplexed.
Probably scared.
Mm-hmm.
Terrified. Terrified. Well, it says they were terrified.
And then I was like, I did not believe them. So
Disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And amazed.
Yeah. I didn't realize, right, because each of the resurrection stories is a little different. Like, they don't actually encounter Jesus. They just encounter the empty tomb. And is this the where he comes? He doesn't even appear to them until they walk to Emmaus.
Yeah, that story to the walk to Emmaus is really. I think we get that. Well, we don't get it the week after. It'd be the Doubting Thomas text, but then I think after the week after that, we may have that story to read.
It's my favorite one.
But the reason I point the feelings out is because, if you were writing the story and you wanted everybody to believe, and you would write something that was more Pollyanna-ish, I would think. I mean, isn't this great? They're celebrating because the tomb's empty and they're happy and they're dancing and blah blah blah. No, that's not what happens. What happens is a very raw human reaction to what had taken place. And so to me it just adds authenticity to the story, because the other thing that adds authenticity to me is why in a day and time in which women were not really held in high esteem in terms of being witnesses, why would you say that the first witnesses were women, unless it was actually true? it's actually true. So they're not afraid to tell the truth, and and it makes sense to me that the women, because I think those guys are probably just a bunch of cowards. And the women were there because they felt like they had a duty to take care of the body.
Right.
And the guys were just still afraid of being outed for being part of his inner circle. But Peter obviously got up. I mean, it says in verse 12, but Peter got up and ran to the tomb. I mean, to me that implies the women went to the tomb, but Peter was maybe somewhere off on the ridgeline, and then he sees the commotion at the tomb, so he runs up and see what's going on, and then he sees that the linen cloths, which is what Joseph of Arimathea wrapped it in.
Yeah, and I I could see that, he had to go check for himself because he didn't believe the women, but I would better go check for myself. Right? The first thing somebody does when they're like, oh, I can't find them, whatever, I'm like, oh, well, now I'm going to go look because I know it's there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Peter. He's like, what? No, of course it's there. Now I have to go check.
The other thing that just gets me is, and then just matter of fact, he went home. He just goes home. See ya.
Doesn't go back to the other disciples.
So what's that about?
Right, because I would be feeling like they get this dazzling men in dazzling clothes telling them that, oh, he's been resurrected, but I'm thinking who stole the body? Where is it now? Why are they doing that?
Well, I want to know who these two men in dazzling clothes were. I mean, are they angels? Are they?
Supposedly, aren't they angels?
Mm-hmm. They're not. I mean.
But angels didn't look like men.
But yeah.
So they would have either intentionally transformed into men to be less threatening.
Are they men?
Men,
In
males?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just in dazzling white. I mean, to me that echoes the Transfiguration. Two men in dazzling white clothes.
Okay.
Two men in dazzling clothes.
Okay, and
beside them.
They were terrified about their faith. Yeah, that would track if it was Moses and Elijah again.
Yeah, it could be, or maybe it was. I don't think we'll ever know. We'll probably die and ask Jesus who were those dudes. Who were they? I want to know. All the questions I'm going to ask God.
You got last, huh?
Yeah, I'm not saying this is real high on that list, but it's one of them.
I think when I see dazzling clothes, I picture them with light around them and not really looking, I don't want to say human, but different somehow.
Some sort of bright aura.
Yeah.
A light that's kind of surrounding them.
That's what I think of when I see the dazzling. If it didn't look normal.
Could have just been, some really white linen with sequins on it.
Well, there seems to be a strong correlation, at least in my opinion, between bodied celestial beings who and light, and death and light. Just there seems to be some correlation to light. What that means. And dazzling, it's not just any light, it's a bright, dazzling kind of light.
And then why is it important to say linen?
Where do you see linen?
Linen is on the last line of our page here. He saw the
Oh,
linen
saw the
cloth
linen
by
cloth.
themselves.
Uh-huh.
And again, in my Bible, it says he peered in and saw the empty linen wrappings. Was there a special reason for the linen?
Well, I mean, we know that Joseph of Arimathea in Mark's Gospel went to in Mark 15, when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph bought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth and laid it in the tomb.
So it's a high quality. Is that
Yeah,
the speculation that linen wasn't just a piece of old
It
cotton?
wasn't for just everybody.
Yeah.
well, I'm following the rabbit hole here on this. So it's C note on
Yeah,
14.
polyester.
No, it didn't have any bottom.
Nylon.
Plastic,
Plastic.
Nobody
body
bags.
bag. I
Yeah, I wonder how common linen was. It's not common anymore. In those Lent bags that we had for people to take home, there was a linen square in it. And we had some from previous years, but we were getting low, so I needed to go find more. They don't even sell it at Hobby Lobby anymore. Yeah, like to buy a yard of it. What I ended up getting was embroidery fabric,
Huh.
which is a type of linen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You can buy linen clothes.
Right. You can still buy linen clothes, but they don't sell it at fabric stores anymore.
You can't buy
A piece of linen. Huh.
a piece of linen?
She told me to try Joann's, but then she found this embroidery fabric
Oh.
for me where I bought
That's interesting.
this big of a square for $8.
I mean, I don't buy linen because I don't want to iron it.
That's like
Yeah.
you say.
I know.
Get wrinkles, so people-
Oh, no, you,
I guess it wasn't. The note in the Bible wasn't going to tell me what we were wondering. So I guess until I do further research on it, I guess my understanding is that that's just a high quality
High quality type of fabric.
of fabric that maybe would have maintained, would have helped in the embalming process. Maybe, I don't know. Just a guess. Yeah, linen is really wrinkly.
Oh. sit down in it once and you look like you slept in it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, but you know, like to wear it. After that.
Yeah.
Maybe it showed the shape of the body even though it was empty.
Maybe. That's reaching.
I don't know. The used linen in a pile.
Is there anything else you notice about the story that?
Wasn't there some question about how the stone got moved away? Somebody said, well, how can the stone was so big, how could this be moved? Was that in another?
Whoever put it there had to move it to get it there.
Well, that's true. What,
Yeah, I think somebody questioned whether it was Roman centurions that moved it and then stole the body. I think was the question, but we know that's not true. When Jesus shows up as the resurrected body, I mean, in this walk to Emmaus, just a few verses after this, it says while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And so, Jesus is there speaking with them and walking with them. And then finally, at the end of the whole journey, he ends up in a communal kind of situation with him, breaking bread. There's that story of the resurrected body, and then the one that I think is hands down the most fascinating is when the disciples are locked in the room,
and he comes in, or he's there.
and he just shows up.
Right.
I mean, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus himself stood among them.
he speaks to
They
them
were startled and terrified.
he's able to do physical things like breathe on them, but yet he walked through the wall. I mean, I want to be able to do that.
Magic.
Well, good luck.
Yeah. But I find that fascinating. That whole story to me is just really deep.
Yeah. So in one of the other Gospels, I don't know which one, the women encountered Jesus in the garden around the tomb, and they think he's the gardener. And then when he says Mary's name, she recognizes him.
Mm-hmm.
So why are the accounts so different? Like,
Because they were written by different people.
True, but they don't know each other. Is it that Luke didn't believe that the women had met Jesus in the garden, so he omitted that part? And then there's one of them has that there was guards in front of the tomb, right, that were asleep when the women get there.
Yeah, that's in Matthew. I kind of liken it to the whole, all of us are on different corners of 90th and Dodge, and there's an event, an accident that takes place in the intersection. We all have a different, we see the same thing, but we have a different
story about it.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time. And that's probably, and then the means of communication were not like they are today. Then, I mean, it's much easier to communicate. And here, people are, it's just different. So it's.
But I feel like they were all in the room together. Like Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John were all in a room together.
And that's.
When Jesus appeared to them.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, too, I think maybe we need to remember is that this was, I don't want to say a traumatic experience. I mean, they were still in trauma from the cross. And everything is happening. They didn't have a mindset or any sort of benchmark event that would have helped them to process what was going on. So this was all, they're wrapped up in emotions, and when we're wrapped up in emotions, we tend to lose cognitive
Sight of
certain things.
That's true. And they all wrote it much later. So they're remembering the parts that were important to them.
Right. And we all remember things differently.
Nothing is really conflictual between these accounts. It's just maybe details that are a little bit different, but they don't. I mean, I guess if you were a prosecutor and you were looking for witnesses and they all gave an account of what happened and you're sitting there taking notes, these are all credible witnesses that you would put up on the stand without fear of them conflicting with another one. They just have different stories to tell. I mean, in Matthew it says, Mary went to see the tomb, and suddenly there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow. Well, in Luke's account, there's two men that were dazzling white, so I don't know. Could there have been another? Here it says, but the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus, who was crucified."
And then one angel.
There was only one angel.
Who moves the stone in front of her? But, yeah. Well, I could also see them right? None of the gospel writers were there, so they're taking the story and probably filling in some of the details of how they think it could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a dazzling light, how do you'd be so shocked? How do you know there would be one or two? You know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I don't know. Very good question. Any other thoughts? This discipleship sheet, yeah, what is it? In the back it talks about what might have felt like for the women to go to the tomb early in the morning, what feelings are related to death. What does it feel like to hear Jesus has risen? How does the Easter message change your expectations of your view of the world? And in my sermon for Sunday, I find Easter and Christmas difficult at times to preach because of what can you say that you haven't already said? But
Is what?
What can you say that you haven't already said 100
yeah.
times? But I think the important thing is how has Easter changed the world? And I think when we see the story of Easter as a done and over deal, then we're not experiencing the full breadth and depth of Easter, because every day we're living the story of Easter. We're living now in the context of the risen body, whereas before we would not have even known what that was. The Jews had no concept of that. So what does it mean to have a God who dies and comes back alive and promises us that same body? So to me, Easter is every day. And it's up to us to continue to tell the story to give hope to the world. Because without that hope, I mean, there's just a lot of really dark things out there in our world.
You know what I remember about, first of all, because I was baptized, I went up in front and was saved when I was 12. And then during the actual baptism, I was immersed, and the organist or pianist or whoever it was played up Christ Arose. Up from the grave he arose, da-da-da. And that really sticks with me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yep. So
it's that's the promise of the resurrection in your baptism.
Yep. Now, I'm not going to come to church on Sunday because I can't stand the smell of the Easter relic.
What? Really?
It just makes my head stop up.
That's a thing.
Yep.
Have you heard that one before?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Really?
I can't think of their names.
Fidelkis.
Yes, she's the same way. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well.
Now, I couldn't come at 6:30, but
The Easter Rose will still be there.
but it's outside.
No, we're not.
Well, you're not going to do it
Oh, you're not
outside.
doing it outside.
No,
Because it's
the
too cold.
forecast is
Bad.
too chilly.
Oh.
So I don't want to do
Well,
that to
good.
people.
I'm excused from that one. I took my communion cup home with me, so I can do that.
So you're gonna watch it?
Well, I watch it here, but I don't get that one, but I do Coons. It's close. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I'm not a fan of that smell either. I'm a fan of Easter lilies, but not the smell. Is really.
No. Mm-hmm. It's like lilacs do the same thing.
They're strong.
Yep.
No, I'll probably Sunday morning.
Thinking about those.
That never crossed my mind.
Crossed your mind?
No.
Let me see. Mm.
I feel like it kind of just blends in with all the candy smell. And that's just like the smell of Easter that I associate. I was like Easter lilies and lots of candy.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, taking the Easter basket and just smelling it, all that sugary smell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I stuffed the eggs that we're using at Pacific Springs yesterday with Pastor Sarah. She had a group of volunteers.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, and that smelled like candy. All that candy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, any further thoughts on Easter besides Easter lilies stink?
They don't stink. They just have
I know.
a overwhelming smell.
Delicious. I've never noticed.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I don't know if you shared with them before I came in about Lee.
Well, I think, no, I really haven't said anything.
Oh.
Like tomorrow.
Okay.
But I knew I was very grateful that you came out and you
Yeah, I
did
gotta
this.
give her a call. Yeah.
He passed away shortly after you were there.
I think it was two of his sons there, and I think maybe he was just waiting for them.
I think so too.
I'm sorry, but who was that?
Lee Bernstein, Anita's.
They wait. They wait.
Bernstein.
No, yeah, well, no, you talk about who's waiting for the sons to come.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that happens.
Yeah.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah, I felt like when I was there, I felt like he of course he didn't open his eyes or anything, but I felt like there was some awareness of what was going on.
I'm sure of that.
But yeah, a lot of members of the family showed up, and I thought, this is good. And then I didn't know about that detail until yesterday. But that makes a lot of sense.
Well,
Close with the Lord's Prayer. Our
Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thanks for being here this morning.
that's a good session. Thank you.
Happy Easter.